semi-warm building out of the cold. Appreciate you being here. We're going to sing number 267. David will lead us in prayer, and then we'll have Bible classes. Church's going to be a little late, so class across the way will stay in here tonight. 267. I believe in the one they call Jesus. I believe he's still Galilee. I believe that he walked on the water. And I believe that he's the answer for me. Yes, I believe in the one they call Jesus. I believe he died on Mount Calvary. And I believe that the tomb was found empty. And I believe that he's the answer for me. I believe in the words of the Bible. How he made the poor blind man to see. I believe that the deaf ears were opened. And I believe he's made a difference in me. Yes, I believe in the one they call Jesus. I believe he died on Mount Calvary. And I believe that the tomb was found empty. And I believe that he's the answer for me. I believe that he spoke to dead Lazarus, and he said, unbind and set free. I believe that he reigns up in heaven, and I believe that he is coming again. Yes, I believe in the one they call Jesus. I believe he died on Mount Calvary. And I believe that the tomb was found empty. And I believe that he's the answer for me.
Our God, our Father, good week Bible today, good blessing, truly being a blessing of being here tonight. Just say up to strengthen our faith, our courage, and deed in our word. Just so we should for our family and friends, especially those that may never hit that word to say what they should. Help us to lead them to the earth. Our Father, those are sick, many are under some serious issues like that. Now, stretch a quick return call to be out of those mentioned to them. Also, medication, things that are technology may have helps to live a full life along. Spiritually, as you do each one of us, truly be blessed. This message, Jesus' name.
That's how you do it.
Get close to this billboard.
Luke chapter number 22. Winding down. We got three chapters counting this one left in our study in Luke. I think we'll just go on to John, if that's all right with everybody. Gospel of John. No objections. Going once. Going twice. All right. That's the plan. All right, Luke chapter 22, 71 verses. If we're going to read it, we're going to have to read and get it done. So we'll spend all night reading. Can't do it. We can do it. I'll start. We'll let somebody jump in after I get started. Luke chapter 22, beginning at verse 1 says, Now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover. The chief priests and scribes sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people. Then entered Satan into Judas, surnamed Iscariot, being of the number of the 12. And he went his way and communed with the chief priests and the captains how he might betray him unto them. And they were glad and coveted to give him money. And he promised and sought opportunity to betray him unto them in the absence of the multitude. Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. And he sent Peter and John, saying, Go and prepare us the Passover, that we may eat. They said unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare? And he said unto them, Behold, when you are entered into the city, there shall a man meet you, bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he entereth in. And ye shall say unto the good man of the house, The master saith unto thee, Where is the guest chamber, where I shall eat the Passover with my disciples? And he shall shew you a large upper room, furnished, there made ready. And they went and found as he had said unto them, and they made ready the Passover. And when the hour was come, he sat down, and the 12 apostles with him. And he said unto them, With desire have I desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say unto you, I will not any more eat thereof until it be fulfilled in the kingdom of God. And he took the cup and gave thanks and said, Take this and divide it among yourselves. For I say unto you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God shall come. And he took bread and gave thanks and brake it and gave unto them, saying, This is my body which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me. Likewise also the cup after supper, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you. But behold, the hand of him that betrayeth me is with me on the table. And truly the Son of Man goeth as it was determined. But woe unto that man by whom he is betrayed. And they began to inquire among themselves which of them it was that should do this thing. And there was also strife among them, which of them should be accounted which of them should be accounted the greatest. And he said unto them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and they that exercise authority upon them are called benefactors. But ye shall not be so. But he that is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he that is chief as he that does serve. For whether is greater, he that sitteth at meat, or he that serveth? Is not he that sitteth at meat, but I am among you as he that serveth. Ye are they which continue with me in my temptations, and I appoint unto you a kingdom, as my Father hath appointed unto me, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Verse 31. Roy, you want to start for us?
And the Lord said, Simon, the old Satan that desired to have you, he may sift you sweet, without praying for thee, that thy faith fail not, and when thou art converted, straighten the bread. He said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with thee, both into prison and to death. And he said, I tell thee, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day, for thou shalt thrice deny me without knowest me. He said to them, when I sent you without purse and scrip and shoes, lacked ye any same thing? And they said, nothing. He said unto them, but now he that hath the purse, let him take it, and likewise his scrip. And he that hath no sword, let him set his garment and buy one. For I say unto you, that this that is written must yet be accomplished in me. And he was reckoned among the transgressors, with the thing concerning me, how an end. And he said, Lord, behold, here are 2 swords. And he said unto them, it is enough.
And he came down and went as he was taught to the mount of Olives. And his disciples also followed him. And when he was at the place, he said unto them, pray that ye enter not into temptation. And he that withdrew his rod from them about a sound's cast, and kneeled down and prayed, saying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not thy will, not my will, but thine be done. And there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And then in an agony he prayed more earnestly. And his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And when he rose up from prayer, he was come to his disciples. He found them asleep or sorrow, and said unto them, why sleep ye? Rise and pray, lest ye enter into temptation.
And my being yet speaking, the God loved you, and ye who was called Jesus, one of the 12, went before him, and drew near to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? When those who were around him saw what was going to happen, they said to him, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said to them, permit even this. And he touched his ear, and he healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests kept around the temple, and the elders who had come to him, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you daily in the temple, you did not try to seize me, but this is your hour and the hour of darkness. Having arrested him, they laid him and brought him to the high priest's house. But Peter followed at a distance. Now when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. And a certain servant girl, seeing him as he sat by the fire, looked intensely at him and said, this man is also with him. But he denied it, saying, woman, I do not know him.
And after a little while, another saw him and said, thou art also of them. And Peter said, man, I am not. And about the space of 1 hour after another confidentially affirmed, saying, of a truth, this fellow also was with him, for he is a Galilean. And Peter said, man, I know not what thou sayest, and immediately when he yet spake the prophet, then the Lord turned and looked unto Peter, and Peter repeated the words of the Lord, how he had said unto him, behold, not brother, shall deny me twice. And Peter went out and went to do it, and the men that helped Jesus mocked him and scoffed him.
When they had blindfolded him, they struck him on the face and asked him, saying, Prophesy, who is it that smote thee? And they do many other things, blasphemous, spoke foul, vain against him. And as soon as it was day, the elders of the people and the chief priests and the scribes came together and led him into their council, saying, Art thou the Christ? Tell us. And he said to them, If I tell you, you will not believe. And if I also ask you, you will not answer me, not let me go, nor let me go. Hereafter shall the Son of Man sit on the right hand of the power of God. Then said they all, Art thou then the Son of God? And he said to them, Ye say that I am. And they said, What need we any further witness? For we ourselves have heard his own mouth.
All right, very good. Question number 1. What is the significance of the Passover as the time for these things to take place? Verse number 1. Do what? Well, what I was looking at is the significance of the Passover. What was the Passover? All right, so it was the memorial service or the meal that was partaken of when the Jews, the night that the firstborn of all of Egypt were killed, and they sacrificed the lamb at that point, put the blood on the doorpost and the lintels. And so that was the sacrifice that was made there in that process of that lamb in that. And so what we have here is Jesus, who was the Passover lamb, as the passing from. So that was a type. The Passover was a type symbolizing Christ as the true Passover sacrifice, so that we could pass from the state of sin, rebellion, and rejection by God into the promise of eternal life, or as they were going to the land of Canaan. So it was a type, and Jesus was going to be that Passover, the true Passover is what it amounted to there. So it was the accomplishment of the type and the real thing right there in one thing. All right, number 2, explain what is meant by what is said, then entered Satan into Judas. All right. You already had it? All right, let me know. Now, I need an explanation. Took control of it. That's a pretty stout word right there. How did Judas take control of Judas? Or how did Satan take control of Judas? I'm looking for something here. It seems to me like Judas lost control of himself here. Judas didn't have any control here. Satan was in control.
He had control. He just let Satan take it.
All right.
He wanted to do it, or he wouldn't have done it.
All right. Satan operated through Judas. Judas still had free will. He still had free moral agency. He could still make a choice, but it says Satan entered into him, or Satan's power was able to use Judas because Judas allowed it. Judas was selfish. He controlled it, but only to the measure that Judas allowed. He could not overwhelm it, is what I was trying to get at. Because the way it's stated here, or the way it sounds, is that, Judas just had to give in to this situation that Satan overpowered him. It doesn't ever work that way. we have the choice, always have the choice, and Satan can only operate or enter into us or operate through us by the means of us giving up or becoming his operative by choice, doing what is wrong or contrary to God's will. So, and a lot of people don't understand that. They think it's a matter of I don't have the control. I can't do it. Is what it says, whatever it may be.
Christ knew what was going to happen. It doesn't mean that he controlled the situation because Satan was uncontrolled. People, they were trying to destroy it.
Right. They allowed themselves to be controlled by that situation. And if we do what's wrong, we're allowing Satan to control us by that means as well. But it's our choice, is what it amounts to. Number 3, what does verse 10 show evidence of? Verse number 10 says, and he said unto them, Behold, when ye are entered into the city, there shall a man meet you bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he entered. What does it show about Jesus?
He knew where he was going to go.
All right. How did he know there was going to be a man bearing a pitcher of water that they would meet?
Same reason he knows what's on your mind. Same way.
All right. So what does that show about Jesus?
He knows all.
All right. His omniscience, his ability to know everything. Omnipotence. No, I think that's all powerful. Yeah, omniscience is all knowing. Yeah. Add it right the first time. All right. Anyway, that shows Jesus Christ as being God because he knew everything in advance. Who are you going to meet on the way home tonight? Anybody want to make any prophecies, predictions for me? Hopefully nobody. Hopefully don't meet nobody on the way home. Alright. Number 4. Why would Jesus desire to eat the Passover with his apostles on this occasion? I desire to eat this particular Passover with you. Why this one? The last one. Alright, so he was fulfilling, it was the end of the fulfillment of his assigned role or work that he had to do at this time. And so he had been working for 3 years and he was working towards that as far as that goes. Alright, so he was anxious to eat this supper. And we'll look at that a little bit more. What does in what order did Jesus institute the practices of the Lord's Supper? I'll let the S off that. Verses 17 through 19. So he took the cup and gave thanks and said, Take this and divide it among yourselves, for I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God shall come. And he took the bread and gave thanks and brake it and gave unto them, saying, This is my body which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me. Then verse 20, I left that one out. Likewise also the cup after supper, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you. What is the order that is given as far as the Lord's Supper? Blood. Okay, that's what it looks like, doesn't it? All right, if you go to Matthew's account gives us the bread and the fruit of the vine. Alright? Mark's does as well. John doesn't give anything as far as the institution of the Lord's Supper. But if you look at it in commentaries that I read on, it says that the institution of the eating of the bread was done during the supper, is what most people believe. While they were eating, he instituted that part of it there. But like it says here in Luke in verse number 20 says, Then after, likewise also the cup after the supper, he takes that and makes specific reference to the blood shed on the cross there for the remission of sins. And he institutes the fruit of the vine as a part of that supper at that point. So I think rightly so we do it in the right order as far as scripturally speaking. It's just a little confusing there. Yeah.
But this implies that he could have been able to really say it.
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to make any difference there. One thing that we should note in that is But it's done during the time of Passover, which means there was not any what available or being used.
Wine.
11. They used the fruit of the vine, which was a wine, a type of wine. But there was no leaven being used at that time. So we do know that it was unleavened bread. So the process, the things that are used are based upon the Passover supper. So that eliminates everything else as far as that goes. So.
Well, the wine suffices to meet the condition of fruit of the vine.
Fruit of the vine? Do you want to go into that, really?
If it's fruit of the vine.
It is fruit of the vine. Let it sit too long, or they believe that it had to be wine. I don't,
You sure it was in a bar or in church?
Number 7. Well, you can't trust the signs now. All right, let's see, where are we here? Number 7. What contrast does Jesus teach in verse number 27? Verse 27 says, "For whether is greater, he that sitteth at meat, or he that serveth, is not he that sitteth at meat, but I am come I'm among you as he that serveth." What is the contrast that he's making here in these particular verses right here? Talking about the Gentiles and how they set the standard on who serves who or who's the greatest or whatever. But then he makes this statement right here. What's the contrast?
Jesus is saying he set them an example. Though he was the greatest, he was willing to be the servant.
Okay. So how does I would say the United States of America, as far as the pecking order and who's the greatest, how would that be looked at?
I think we're very clearly we don't look at it like spiritually minded, but we look at who's got authority or so forth.
And really, we're having a hard time establishing authority and respect for authority throughout the land as far as that goes, especially in this day and age. But notably, this is the way it is. I mean, a person we can see has authority. If you go into the government, there's a situation where authority is the way it's supposed to be.
And you look at my house,
And you can look at Roy's house and how Roy's the head of the house. You can look at Roy and how he's the head of the house and how his wife is in subjection. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And if you want to get with me afterwards and talk about that, I'll give you the truth on the matter. But realistically, we understand that there is a standard established way or pattern as far as authority is concerned. But that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about how we look at it as far as greatness is concerned. Mankind looks at it in strength, maybe in financial situation, whatever it may be, is backwards from what God says it is. Jesus Christ says here that the greatest, from the standpoint of God, is the person who serves other people. So we can look at it from this standpoint. How many people do I serve? How many people do you serve? In the eyes of God, how great am I and how great are you? And we don't look at it that way. It's this is what I've got to do. This is what I need. And that's, we have to battle that in order to seek true greatness in the eyes of God. Number 8, what can we learn about Satan and temptation from verses 31 and 32? This is talking about Peter and his particular situation here. Jesus is at the supper. He's instituted the Lord's Supper. He's dealt with this situation with them going back and forth about who's the greatest among them. And then he talks about the situation that's getting ready to come with his arrest and trial and crucifixion and what's going to happen with them. And he speaks specifically to Peter, saying in verse 30, 1, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not, and when thou art converted, strengthen thy What does this tell us about Satan? What can we determine about it? He what? All right, he had great power. He had the desire for what? Who? Peter. And Peter specifically is what he's saying. Satan wants you. He knew that Peter was to be a great tool for Jesus, and he was coming after him in that respect. Is that just specifically Peter's what we want to say? No. He wants to take all of us, especially those who are striving to serve Jesus and be faithful Christians. He wants to get us and twist us and turn us upside down so that we become disheartened, discouraged, or whatever it can take to cause us to fall away. That's his whole goal. The Lord knew it. Did Peter know? Peter didn't see any sense of danger. He wasn't apprehensive about the situation at all. What did he say in verse 33? I'm ready to go to prison. I'm ready to die. This is, he didn't see any problems here or any reason to be concerned. But what else can we see about the particular situation in 31 and 32 that Jesus says that we should be aware of as far as Satan is concerned? What did Jesus say that he was going to do? Or he had done? Alright, so in the battle for our souls and our standing faithfully, we need the prayers of Jesus Christ in our behalf. There's only one relationship that we can have in which that will take place, and that's in being a faithful Christian. We don't have the opportunity of having Jesus to do, to mediate for us or in our behalf if we're not living faithfully to it. The next question, though, is a part of that. What is meant by Jesus' statement to Peter about after he's converted? All right, after he'd gone past it, after he had been restored, Peter's going to fall. We're going to see this in a few minutes. Peter's faith was shaken as far as that goes. It wasn't completely annihilated, but it was shaken to the foundation. He denied Jesus on multiple occasions here just within a short period of time. So conversion is the restoration. And what was he to do at the point of restoration when he came back to his senses about Christ? Alright, so that put Peter in a situation where he had the ability to relate to people. As far as having fallen down, having denied the Lord, he had the ability to empathize with people who were down and out, downtrodden. But what I see in this is the fact that Peter, when he was converted, when he came back around, he went to work and started doing things for the Lord. A lot of times people repent in the sense that they recognize that they've done things wrong and they've been in rebellion against God, and they'll repent, but they don't go into helping the brethren or start converting or start doing something to help other people to become more spiritually strong or to strengthen other people. And that was one of the things that Peter was required to do by the Lord. We can't just repent and then move forward just in our lives. We have to apply ourselves, and realistically, to some degree, it goes back to the discussion of who's greatest. You got to go back and start serving others. And that's what Jesus was saying here. Peter, when you are converted, you serve others by encouraging those who are downtrodden or who have fallen or whatever it may be there. So, Peter's a good example of what we need to do as far as the conversion process is concerned. Peter had already confessed Jesus Christ as the Son of God. You go back to Matthew 16. It's when Jesus asked who they say that I am, and they quoted all these prophets that they said he was. And Peter was the one that said what? Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. He was firmly committed in his mind that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. Living up to it was the problem that he was having. And that's, a lot of times, that's what we're talking about, is the fact that living up to it is where it comes down And by helping other people, that helps our own faith as well.
Which one of the parables is where she swept her house? Something about that, and then you don't put the thing back in.
Well, I think you're getting two of the parables mixed up. You got the one of the 10 coins that swept her house looking for the one coin, but also I think what you're talking about is where the evil spirit is taken out and he goes his way and wanders in the far lands and then comes back and finds the house swept and clean and goes back in and takes 7 demons worse than himself. And that's a part of this process as well. If we don't start applying ourselves to doing the good works, then the bad will come back in and will be worse than we were before. So, it's a spiritual concept that we have to work on to implement into our lives the good practice, the good works, the good things, so that the bad doesn't have any place to move in or to overcome our lives. Number 10. What is being indicated by the command to take purse, scrip, and sword? Verse number 36. All right. All right. So he's making a comparison back to when he sent out the 70 on the limited commission. When he sent those disciples out, he said, don't take your purse with you, don't take 2 pairs of shoes, don't take 2 coats. Just go and whatever house you come to. Yeah. You're not preparing to stay for a long time. You're not preparing to do anything but go preach. And it was limited in scope. And he said that you would be taken care of. You go into a house and the people would take care of you. That they should not have any. And he's asking them here, he said, did you have any need at that point? And they said no. All right, but now he's saying what? That this is no longer limited in scope. That the picture is changing completely as far as what's going to happen. And as you look, they did meet some confrontations along the way as far as the limited commission. Some people rejected what they were saying as far as coming to the kingdom. But it was not the scope of the persecution that was about to come upon them because of the church and the things that they were going to face there. And it was a long-term situation. They were not going to be coming back to Christ on the earth in that situation. So he says, take purse, scrip, sword. He's saying to prepare yourselves, to take care of yourselves for whatever may come.
First would be sword. Scripture would be the truth. And then, of course, sword would be the sense of the truth.
Could be. Barns and I don't know. A couple of them said that there were wild animals and robbers and stuff like that along the way in this land here. So self-defense was something that might be necessary as far as that goes. Of course, the sword is not used in promotion of the gospel. Huh?
They take the sword to be ready to defend the truth.
Well, but was it a spiritual sense in the purse? Was it a spiritual sense in the script? So what you're
support.
Okay, but we were talking about physical things. Huh?
It was the money, the support.
Right, but it was physical is what he was talking about. And all 3 of them were physical in that respect. So it wasn't physical, spiritual. It was all. They were to take a sword with them.
Well, when I travel, I don't worry about my purse. I do the what.
And they can take yours because you don't have a sword with you, so you don't make no difference.
Well, I learned a long time ago the way to handle things. I'll give you this advice. Let your wife pay all the bills. Give her $5 a week. She can spend the way you want to. Don't ask any questions.
We're not going to go down that road.
That's what I recommend.
Okay. Every man's entitled to his opinion. All right, number 11.
Some of you men don't like that.
Number 11, describe the conflict that is shown in Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, verse number 42. 42 says, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. Yeah. All right. He saw what he's facing. He had a conflict, though. What was the conflict?
He didn't want to die.
No. had the human nature, or the self-preservation, the will to survive and not feel the pain and that sort of thing. That was normal. But yet he was able to subject that to the spiritual will of God the Father and go through what he had to go through. So he faced, just like we do, the carnal, physical problems that we face, and the conflict between the spiritual and the physical, just like we do. He was no different from us in that respect. Number 12, what is the significance of Jesus betraying, or Judas, I should say, betraying him with a kiss? Mark it out for Judas. What is the significance of Judas betraying Jesus with a kiss? All right, yeah. So, oh, how I love Jesus, giving him a kiss, yet he was betraying him. And so we see that our actions do indicate what our hearts truly are. You know, he was that's just a horrible way to look at it. But, when we don't live the Christian life, there's no difference between us and Judas in giving him a kiss and betrayal. Because people look at our lives just as well. Third thing, what can we learn from what Jesus said in verse 53 about the power of darkness? Verse 53 says, when I was daily with you in the temple, ye stretched forth no hands against me, but this hour, this is your hour, and the power of darkness.
Evil knows when to attack at the weakest moment of whatever situation.
Okay. What about our own lives? When things are not going right, when we're being faced with situations where we won't respond in a unchristian way, I guess you might say, or something to that effect, to avenge ourselves or get people told or whatever it may be. Jesus says, this is happening to me because it's the time for the power of darkness. This is the way it's got to be. This is the trial that I've got to go through. This is the thing that I have to face in order to accomplish my will, or God's will in my life.
What do you say to people who say the Lord said, if you smite him right cheek, turn to him the left? If the Lord didn't tell you what to do with you, sneak you hold you on the left.
Well, the thing about it is, I think that's a misapplication of what Jesus is trying to say.
Well, I think it does say there's a limit to what you have to do.
Well, yeah, there is a limit, I'm sure, but do we ever reach the limit? What I'm trying to get at in this verse 53 right here, Jesus is saying, this has come to me because this is God's will that it be done. Now, we have to find in our lives when things are not going right, the strength to realize that God is in control and accept some things rather than fight against them. Jesus didn't fight back. He prayed that God take it away from him, but he recognized that he had to go through it. And in order for us, if you look at life as a whole, what makes muscles strong? No pain, no gain, right? Spiritually speaking, the same is true. We're not going to grow spiritually to be what God would have us to be unless we are tested and tried spiritually speaking. We can't just cruise on through and grow without the challenges that come with it. That's true in life. That's a principle. And Jesus recognized the power of darkness was being allowed by God to overcome Christ and kill him here. And there are some things that God allows in our lives so that if we handle them appropriately, we'll grow and become what God would have us to be, and we can be a better, stronger, sharper tool for God to use. And if we don't, then we don't become what God would have us to be. There's only two ways to go, up or down. There's no level playing field as far as life is concerned. Number 14, how can we apply Peter's situation in the high priest's house to ourselves? What happened to Peter in the high priest's house? Disown Jesus, yeah. All right? Can we apply it?
What'd you say?
How do you apply Peter's actions or situation in the high priest's house to your own life? Is there any situation that we might encounter that would be like that? You're one of his. I don't know him. I saw you with him. I don't know him. Listen to the way he talks. He's one of his. Listen, man, I don't know what you're talking about. You know,
I think it makes all of us realize that we're all Peters when you go down to the end. Anybody can be weak enough to deny the Lord if he's not also careful.
and we've got to be careful. You have to admire Peter. He was walking right into the lines then, so to speak, in the sense of going in there, knowing what was going on. Most people would not have, but the rest of the apostles, they were not to be found except for John.
How do you think he felt when Peter cut off his ear and the Lord healed him and said, put up your sword?
That goes back to sometimes you just have to accept the things that are happening in your life for a benefit.
That's not the way to live. To live with the word of God.
Yeah.
Over God. Not by defending yourself.
Yes.
Well, I don't think it says that it's wrong to nation of defense. I don't think it's that far.
I think that in Peter's situation here, you have to admire him for going as far as he did, but you also have to be careful that you don't put yourself in a situation where there's a time and a place to walk away.
Don't start in your house.
Huh?
You didn't go.
He went to the high priest's house. Peter went all the way in. He was with see, verse number 62. What characteristics do we see in Peter? Peter went out and wept bitterly. What would that indicate about Peter? Sorrow. Huh?
He realized that he had done wrong.
All right. Shame. Shame. I just can't imagine. How do you think Jesus looked at Peter? It says there, Jesus turned and looked at Peter. Wonder what that expression was on Jesus' face. Disappointment, anger, disbelief. Just a glance. But it reminds or makes me think about, when you do wrong, Jesus turning and looking at you or me in that respect. How do I react, or what do I think as far as Jesus looking at me when I do something wrong? It says here, Peter went out and wept bitterly. That shows a kind of heart there. Sometimes I think we don't really think about the idea that Jesus is looking at us just as emphatically as he did at Peter on this particular situation when we're not doing what's right.
He's probably seeing us even better.
Yeah. But we don't have him looking at us eye to eyeball in that respect. And we need to see it more clearly, I think.
Should we have that faith?
Number 16, what characteristics are displayed in the actions of those involved in Jesus' trial, 63 through 65? This is where it talks about him mocking him, beating him, blindfolding him, hitting him, asking who smote thee. This is just, you think about how people mistreat people and abuse people and all that. What kind of how it makes you feel. When you think about the difference in right and wrong and when people are not living right, it's the same actions that are displayed towards Christ here. And what should be our attitude towards people who act that way? indifferent, don't care, angry, sad. That's number 17. What is meant by the term speaking blasphemously against Jesus? Verse number 65.
Wouldn't be wonderful if we knew what it said more correctly, more completely. And we have an idea clearly, blasphemously. Wonder what, well, I always wondered how it might be. I guess the reason they didn't want to put it there, those words would be everywhere in all the world. And that's not the most important thing about this whole story.
Well, the language that they used and the way that they treat him, you talk about blasphemy, belittling, something that's spiritual in nature. He claimed to be the Son of God. They were saying point blank he wasn't the Son of God and trying to do everything in the world to tear him as far down in their own minds as they could.
Well, when they said prophesied to us, it was supposed to show they were saying you don't know nothing. You're not so.
You go back and you look at it in the garden, you're talking about cutting off Malchus' ear. Those people right there in that group right there saw him perform that miracle of the healing of a man's ear and sat right there and beat on him and cussed him and did all this stuff, having seen a miracle right there in the presence just a few hours before. It just shows how indifferent, hard-hearted people are. You know, nothing will touch their heart. I think that's a lot of what this is about is you read it and you think about it and don't do anything and your heart gets harder and harder, and so it's, you know, it comes to a point where it can't be touched. All right. Yep. I'm afraid that it's something that's getting worse and worse, unfortunately. Appreciate y'all being here. Hope y'all got a little bit out of the class. Anybody got anything you want to add to it? I won't ring the bell. Huh? Oh, it rang?
Yeah,
Did it? Okay. Yeah. Did it really? They just put them out there. I guess.
He's not in a wreck. He got behind the wreck. He turned around. He closed the roads and the interstate and around.
All right. Now you see, Kurt's traveling on the road somewhere. What did they find out about Bobby's son?
Bobby has, he's had pneumonia. He still has a mild case. Working very part time. At home today.
Bobby's, they determined that he had pneumonia is what's been wrong with him. They were thinking it was his stomach, but he's had a bout with pneumonia, so he's at home right now.
Evelyn is still at the specialty hospital. She's supposed to move to the rehab side of Texas. Midtown. Monday or Tuesday.
All right. Still missing a few. Somebody else must not have heard that well besides me. Like a clip. Heard them out. We'll sing number 50 as an invitation song. I'll give you a quote from the scriptures. I'm going to tell you where it's at. See if y'all can figure out who said this. Should everybody be able to? It's pretty easy. It says, "Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. But whither thou goest, I will go. Whither thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest, will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me." Quote, who is that? Ruth. Ruth said that to her mother-in-law. I want to think for just a minute as our invitation about commitment. Commitment. When we think about Ruth, what she just said to her mother-in-law here, she was committing herself to leaving her homeland, leaving her family, leaving everyone that she knew, leaving the religion, if you will, of idolatry, and what went on there in Moab, and going to a foreign land where she knew no one, didn't know what was going to happen. She was leaving her security, her family, her home, and everything. And I think it's interesting to note how committed she was, and that she said, "The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me." Talking about how committed Ruth was to her mother-in-law. Ruth recognized in her mother-in-law the way of God. She was introduced to God, the God of Israel, the true and living God, and recognized the truth. And so she had a sister-in-law who decided that she didn't want it. She decided that she didn't want to go, and so she went back home. That wasn't the attitude of Ruth. When I think about it, she made a commitment to go as far as death. When you think about what we're called upon to do as far as committing ourselves to Christ, the same is true for us as well. We need to be just like Ruth and be able to say what Ruth said in respect to following after Christ. It says, where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried, and the Lord do so to me, more also, if all death part thee from me. When you think about it, Jesus said this: "If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother, and wife and children, and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoso doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." Jesus requires of us that we make the kind of commitment like what Ruth is an example of. Everything's got to go. Sometimes it's not easy, but it's just something that once a person makes the commitment to follow Jesus, that's the way it's going to be, no matter what. But you think about it. We looked at the example in Luke tonight what Jesus went through. Jesus set the example. When you think about Hebrews 5, 8, and 9, it says, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation to all them that obey him. Jesus set us the example of the perfect commitment. He became the obedient son when he came to this earth. He gave up everything and committed himself to following out what God's plan was for him. And so Jesus set the example. He's given us the instructions to do it. And we can commit to it. It doesn't mean that we'll live a perfect life, but it does mean that we'll make the changes necessary in our lives to be faithful to God. It means that if we're not a Christian, we'll be obedient to what Jesus said to do in order to become a Christian, become a child of God through obedience to the plan of salvation, hearing, believing, repenting, confessing, and being baptized. It also talks about the commitment we're making is a lifetime commitment. It's not something that's just one time. We say, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, but it's something that happens on a daily basis. If I have to jettison something today to be a faithful Christian, I'll jettison it today. That's the commitment that we're making when we say, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Sometimes we don't recognize what is involved in that commitment. So as changes, we face changes, sometimes it's difficult as a Christian to do. But, Ruth was rewarded because of her commitment. She was placed in the lineage of Jesus. She's in the line of Christ. She came before Jesus, and his birth was she was a part of that. And in the same respect, we'll be blessed just like Ruth because we will be a part of the family of Jesus on this side of it by committing ourselves like she did. We'll be together. So tonight, let's think about it. Are we faithful Christians? Do we need to become a Christian? We need to make changes in our life so that we can be what Christ would have us to be. If not, we're going to sing the first and last verses of number 50 to encourage us as together we stand and sing. Have you been to Jesus for the cleansing power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you fully trusting in His grace this hour? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Lay aside the garments that are stained with sin, and be washed in the blood of the Lamb. There's a fountain flowing for the soul unclean. Oh, be washed in the blood of the Lamb. Are you washed in the blood, in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are there any announcements that need to be made at this time? I think we've discussed those who are on the sick list. There are some that we didn't mention, but let's remember those in our prayers, those who are shut in and can't get out. Kara Martin Chandler are home sick. Anybody else? Axton's home sick. New York's hard on them. All right. Family Bible Day. It's the 8th. Is that 11th? Second Saturday in December. We'll be making some plans starting this week on that. Hope everybody can make arrangements for that and invite some people to be a part of that. We're going to be studying the case of John the Baptist. His birth, his life, his death. So I think that would be an interesting study and application to our lives. Hope everybody will be a part of that. Anything else? No other announcements. Chris, would you lead us in the close of prayer?
Lord, thank you for today. Having us all here safe to learn a little bit more about your word. Please be safe throughout the rest of the week and back to the next one. You have a great.
Y'all be careful. Stay warm. Ready?